Israel Music Showcase Festival 2025. I'm Itai Patia from th-Marker. We're joined by John Akosta, musician, producer, and manager. He worked with Beck and collaborated with Capitol Records, Geffen, and many more. Hi, John. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. So we just concluded 5 days of performances in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. Which acts did you get to see? Any names you'd like to follow from now on?
Yeah. You know, it's incredible. There's so much music. I would say, you know, I said this before to a couple other friends, like you guys have a deep bench, you know, when you're playing baseball, they're like, oh, you got a deep bench because you know that this player is great and another one behind him. And you really do have that here. I mean, just phenomenal artists. The diversity of artists is so incredible. You know, you have everything from Afrobeat to, you know, to klezmer and hip hop and Hebrew hip hop and amazing jazz and classical and, you know, anything in the world, you know, synth pop, you know, experimental. You got it all. You know, it's like its own universe. And, you know, it's hard to pick out what I would say are any standouts because there's so many. And I don't want to seem like favoritism or anything like that.
Okay.
But you know, Danny Kuttner, I think, a young artist, female artist, is really great. I think she's great in the sense that what she's doing can be, you can hear that coming out of LA, you can hear that coming out of London. You know, it's a sound that is very, you know, I think popular now in terms of indie. So that was really cool. There's another group, Dede, I think, Dede, like a Ethiopian African vibe, was amazing. Some of the sacred kind of sounding music that's very traditional here was really beautiful. And you know, I'm sorry, the names escape me. There's a lot of years of being a musician and smoking weed. You know, apparently that can supposedly have some effect on the brain cells. So I have been taking ginkgo biloba to restore those brain cells. But I think now some of the names escape me. But yeah, fantastic musicians and really taken away by you know, the talent here.
You talked about sounds that are popular right now in the world, and I wanted to ask you, when you come here scouting for talents, are you looking to hear something different, as in not American, not global, maybe sort of a local sound, or you're just looking to hear some good music regardless of genres or influences?
I would say the latter. You know, really in the work that I've been doing lately, in particular, been working with TV companies that are licensing music. So, you know, their tastes vary from project to project. You know, one day they can say, we want music from the island of Malta. You know, whatever that is, we need that for this episode or for this season. And then the next day they say, oh, we need some Arabian sounding pop music. Or we want some really grungy hip hop. Or we want some, you know, indie rock band sound, you know, or we want some African Afrobeat music, you know. So it
depends on the project that they're filming.
Exactly, and the show, or even a scene. It could come down to one scene. They're like, hey, these guys are going to go into a reggae club. We need some reggae, just an instrumental track. And one of the things with, you know, with sync now is that you might have a great artist who has an amazing song with a certain vibe to it, and they may say, hey, can you make a remix of the song with one vocal or no vocal? And the artist really should be welcoming this kind of adjustment to the music just to get their music placed, which then you put your foot in the door for other opportunities. Sometimes artists will limit themselves and say, no, you have to take the song the way I produced it and mixed it, which I understand as an artistic thing. You respect and you're like, no problem. That's, you know, that's obviously your choice. But that can be the difference whether they use the song or not. So. Yeah, but it can be anything and everything, like I mentioned.
Well, we'll get to that connection between music and film and TV a bit later, but I also wanted to, like, obviously something that we have to address is that the sentiment toward Israel has deteriorated dramatically since the war started, and you're here looking for musicians that you can promote abroad. And we recently heard Noga Erez and Esther Rada, if you know who those are, telling about threats that they received abroad when they went to perform.
Wow.
A show of trance duo Infected Mushroom in Australia was cancelled. So my question, is, do people abroad really want to listen nowadays to Israeli music?
I would say yes. You know, I was just in Brazil, in Recife actually, which is there's a town a couple hours out that it's called Pessoa, which is a place where Brazilians go to vacation and retire.
Okay.
And you see a lot of Israeli flags and flags of Israel with Brazilian. And there's a community in Brazil that is very pro-Israel. There's also a community, probably more in Rio de Janeiro, that's not pro-Israel, it's very pro-Palestine. Yeah. Obviously, the war has polarized people one way or another. You know, you have people who are really pro-Israel and support that and understand, you know, what Israel's doing for its own survival is necessary. And there are other people who are very sympathetic to the Palestinian side. And you have people in between, you know. I personally think, well, in terms of sync, you know, in terms of the space that I work in, they don't really give a shit, to be honest with you.
Because
they don't care if it's Palestinian.
Combined in the background of some movie.
They don't care. They won't even ask me, oh, was this an Israeli musician? Was this, you know, it's like, they may say, oh, where's the artist from? And I may say, oh, from Tel Aviv, or from Jerusalem, or from, you know, New York, or whatever. But they're not getting into those details because that is not going to, when they hear the music and the scene, the people who are watching the show aren't wondering whether it's an Israeli or Palestinian or Cuban or Sudanese. They don't, and frankly, they don't care because they want to hear good music. In terms of me and my position, you know, I'm in this industry now over 30 years, and I've always been pro-musician. I'm pro-musician, whether it's an Israeli musician, a Palestinian musician, you know, Cuban musician, even a Russian musician when we have these challenges, and Chinese musicians. Yeah. So for me, it's about the music, and it's not my role or place to really take a political position. Yeah. You know, I have kids, and they ask questions, and I say, look, you really need to look at these conflicts, these worldwide conflicts, from both sides. You know, before you take an opinion, don't just look at, you know, Al Jazeera and think that that's the truth. You really have to weigh all these bits of information and come to your own conclusions. And I think it's really important for people to receive that in an open way and not just see it through the eyes of CNN or, you know, like I said right before. So hopefully that answers your question. Sorry, I go off on tangents.
No,
you got to bring me back.
No, it does. I don't need to bring you back. You talked about your, you know, your job regarding sync music. I mean, music combined in TV and film. But if I'd ask you, like in a manager and a musician's manager perspective,
right, trying to book artists.
Yeah. I want to ask about No Music for Genocide. If you heard about that initiative to pull music from streaming services.
I've heard about it a little. Yeah.
So, for example, Georgia Smith, Hot Chip, Caribou, and a few others that I like did that. And dare I say, I'm not impressed because Israel obviously is not a big market for them. So there's not a lot of money on the line. But were you to represent an artist that wants to pull his music from a meaningful market for him, for similar reasons, geopolitical reasons, what would you advise him?
You know, it's tough. I'm not in that position, so it's hard to put myself in a position that I don't know all of the, you know, the surrounding dynamics, right? The dynamics. But I would say that, you know, I think the music needs to speak to, you know, I think when you're booking a band, I do some events, you want to make sure that the audience that you're bringing an artist to is receptive to that artist. Obviously now the climate is not ideal in certain places for Israeli artists. I mean, that's an obvious fact. The same way that when the United States invaded Iraq, the climate wasn't great for Americans around the world. I mean, I was traveling in Cuba at the time, and frankly, I was not received very well as an American, even with Cuban family, but as an American during a wartime, Americans are targets. So
although I can't imagine a situation where American music, which is the most popular music in the world, is being banned.
If you go to Brazil, even today, there are people strongly against English-speaking music, but it's not because of our politics. It's a cultural pride thing for them. And it's such a big country in Brazil that they don't need American music. They make and produce and consume their own stuff.
Yeah, Asian market the same.
Asian the same. Korea, but then there's countries that purposely are anti-American. And unfortunately, I get that a lot. When I travel abroad, I work a lot in Argentina and Brazil. And there are people with, American, and so I can relate to an Israeli in that way. But I think this is going to pass for you guys. I think it's a time thing. I think the more this stuff gets worked out and settled, the more this art, artists continue to make their art, make great art, it'll break through. And some of the artists you said that are pulling their music out, whatever. I don't think. I mean, they don't really sound like anybody's going to lose any sleep over them. I mean, it's not like if it's Taylor Swift, I don't know. Maybe I'll be worried. But these other artists, I don't know if it really matters.
Yeah, some of them are big names. But okay, John. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You're also head of the American Musicians Federation in California, right?
So I was the president of the Los Angeles Union, which is the largest in the West Coast and in the Federation. I'm on the board of directors now, and I'm on the board of directors of the International Union, which is the whole United States and Canada.
Okay, and the organization, what it does is it protects the songwriter owners, whether it's lyrics and melody writers, or singers and players in actual recordings. Right?
So what we do, to correct you, because that's not totally accurate, which is okay, we represent musicians as performers. So if you're
for recording,
for everything.
Okay.
So if you're in the LA Philharmonic and you're playing Beethoven, we represent you. If you're in the New York Philharmonic playing whatever music, we represent. So how much they're going to get paid, how many breaks they're going to get, what's their pension, what's their medical insurance, how much vacation, we negotiate that. We make sure. And then when the company doesn't do it, we go after them and we do the legal things to make sure they take care of it. We do the same for Broadway, we do it for touring, we do it for motion pictures, we do it for television. When you go and you listen to Star Wars soundtrack, our musicians played the music in Hollywood for most of the soundtracks, not all. And then we represent them in terms of how much they get paid for the recording, how much they get paid when the music goes to Netflix, how much they get paid when it's in the airplane. We do all that. So live recording, live TV, video games,
and
interactive.
That's also if a soundtrack that they recorded is uploaded to Spotify?
Exactly. Yeah, we represent that. So imagine you have let's say the Israeli Philharmonic here.
Yeah.
We would be the ones negotiating the wages of the Israeli Philharmonic with whoever's paying them, which is probably the government. So we would say, hey, government, we need to have 300 shekels per hour for this musician, and then they get 2 weeks of vacation every 6 months. We do all of this. Okay. If they go on tour, they need to get this much money and this much break, and if there's a problem in the tour, they need to have a 5-star hotel. Like, we do all that, like the agent in a way. But as a union, we have legal rights to be able to go after the companies to file what we call grievance. Is like a lawsuit.
Yeah.
We do that. We enforce the contracts, and we've been around since 1890.
Okay.
Not me personally. I'm not that old.
Yeah.
I'm a little younger, although I might look around 1920.
Nah. Well, okay. So I wanted to ask you about. You must have like an opinion about something regarding a similar union, and that is the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers. It had a long fight with Spotify over royalties.
Yeah. What is the acronym? The acronym is. They have an interesting acronym. The
UW.
Musicians and Allied Work, MUA or something like that.
It's something like that. Yeah. So if I cut a long story short,
I know those guys. I know them.
And you know their work.
Yeah.
Most recently, maybe that was a year or 2 years ago, Spotify raised prices in the US while adding to the subscription access to audiobooks. Now they changed the revenue share model to reflect that subscribers are not just paying for music.
Right.
What's your take on this whole situation? Do you have any take?
Yeah, no, I do. And thank you for the question. The union in the US has the benefit of having really been, in a way, lucky. Because we have collective agreements with all the labels, with the Warner Brothers, Universal, Sony, blah, blah, blah. We have those agreements going back to the 1950s. And in the U.S., the labor laws is such that once you have a collective bargaining agreement with a union, you can't just tear it up and say, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to go in a different direction. Legally, those parties, the employer and the union, are bound to negotiate till both mutually agree to walk away. So we can't get a divorce unless we both agree is what's happening. We came up with a business model, and SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union, also represents the singers. All the singers are part of it. It used to be AFTRA, but they merged. And maybe they were the smarter one and we just copied them, but we came up with this digital rights agreement in 1999 that created some revenue streams for musicians and singers that the money from the revenue generated would go into this pot, and this pot would be shared with all the artists, right? And in 1999, it was nothing. It was
even before
CDs.
The iTunes store, man.
It was around, Napster was already out and stuff like that. I think but we got in there early, and then that was a piece of paper that was just there, but it was getting renewed. When the labels got into the streaming game, they actually, I don't know if you know this, but they created another company that actually owns a big part of Spotify.
Yeah, you can see that Universal Music's net income, sometimes it soars only because of the streaming. Spotify stock.
Right.
Soars, and it's holding there, and you can see
exactly.
it to date.
So a lot of the labels went in on Spotify and they own a piece of it. Yeah. They wouldn't put that on the cover of a newspaper because basically they're licensing it back to themselves. It's like you open a cheese store to sell cheese, but then you're making the cheese and selling it from your cheese farm back to your cheese company and say, oh, they're two separate companies, even though you're making money from the cheese and from the cheese store that's selling it. So that's what they've done. Because we had that piece of paper that we kind of stupidly entered into, but was a smart thing, they have had to pay a percentage of all the revenues that they get from streaming into this fund, and then we get that money. And it goes through Sound Exchange, which is the big digital rights collector. That money goes in and it's split with the featured artist, which is Taylor Swift. And then the part goes to the guys and girls playing with Taylor Swift. So all the musicians in the band are getting a piece of the pie. Last time, I think last year they distributed over $300 million in 1 year to American artists and maybe foreign artists too that they send back to these different countries. And then we have another fund that's between the union, SAG-AFTRA and AFM fund, and we're getting revenues, and we just distributed about $70 million last year. So you figure we're over $400 million in distributions and digital rights. So to answer your question, how do I feel about it? I think the U.S. is in a really good position because of these agreements. I think U.S. musicians are seeing revenues that other musicians are not seeing in the rest of the world because they don't have these agreements. Our brothers and sisters in the U.K., phenomenal musicians, they don't have these rights. I mean, they're getting money through an organization called PPL, which is their digital kind of collective that they get. But it's nowhere near the percentages we have. And even the labels now that we have these agreements are trying to get out of them because they're like, oh shit, this is too much money.
Would you say there are still more wars to fight against
Absolutely.
Spotify?
Yeah. Because even at the level that we are getting funds and we're distributing it, it's still a really small piece of the pie compared. I mean, I don't know if you have a pie and let's say, you have 100%, the pie is 100%. We're probably getting less than 1% of that pie, one of the 100. And I think, I mean, when you go and you listen to something on Spotify, it's about music. When you go and look at an artist perform on the Grammys, it's about the artist and the music. And yet, why are those people getting the smallest amount? You're not going to hear the accountant, sing the song.
Exactly. That brings me to my next question about Spotify's head executive, Daniel Ek, up until recently he was the CEO, now he's the chairman of the board. So he made a lot of money by selling the stock of Spotify, which blossomed thanks to musicians and their work. And he took that money, he invested 600 million euro, if I'm not mistaken, in a military AI company.
Wow.
And then massive attack, they pulled their music out of Spotify. I don't know, I have a feeling that Lucian Grange, CEO of Universal Music, wouldn't do such a thing. Do you also have any criticism for Daniel Ek about doing that?
I mean, I think a society where you have these multi-billionaires and the workers, and they're profiting off of the backs of the workers to such a degree, I think is wrong. I think when you look at, some of the European countries where they say, okay, the CEO's salary can't be more than X. They do that in certain countries. I think that is a better model. I have friends in the U.S. who probably disagree with me and say, because we're like a
corporate America.
We're a capitalist country and we just eat our own, basically. But I think, government intervention is not always a bad thing. And I think if the government could limit those revenues and make sure that you need a healthy artist community, and the only way you do that is to making sure they're getting the right percentages, and less than 1% to me is not the right number.
Yeah. Okay. Now getting back to Sync Music, what did you do? You have your own production company, Sonic Poncho.
Sonic Poncho, yeah.
All right, and it's focused on collaboration between musicians and film and TV industries. Right. Now, in the streaming era, talking about streaming, but now TV streaming, video streaming, is the number of views for a series or certain views threshold in platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Peacock. Are all those taken into account when paying musicians?
That's a great question. You know, I think the way I understand it, because it's still new in terms of how it's trickling down to us. You know, the Netflix as one example, when SAG-AFTRA, the actors union that represents the singers in this case, and the actors, I guess, they, you know, it's a different business model than, you know, Universal Pictures or Universal Television, which they would have this, they had this thing called, God, what's the name of it? The Nielsen. I don't know if Nielsen data, you're familiar with this? Nielsen,
research
the research data they would get from the Nielsen reports, and we look at them every week, and they'd be like, oh, this show got 1 million views, and then, you know, and then they would, and then of course you had the advertisers paying all this money, so they could say, we got X number of advertising dollars, we got X number of views because Nielsen told us, and this is how much we got to pay the performers in terms of, you know, royalties.
So also performers are not just getting paid up front, they also success if the show success.
In the acting world, yes. In the acting world, if you're an actor and you're performing in a TV, in a traditional television show, and the show goes for syndication, it's all over the country, you're getting more money per plays.
How about
and you're
musicians?
Musicians, it depends. So with TV, we have what's called, and film, called secondary markets.
Okay.
So this is all traditional, this is the old model, which still exists, but is dying off, where we were getting, so if I did a song for, let's say, a TV show, I don't know, I'll pick one, Friends, you know, this TV show.
Yeah.
So if I was on Friends and then it was playing in New York, but then they have it in LA and Las Vegas and Houston, I would get secondary markets. When it played again, I would get another little money and a little money and a little money. And then every 3 months, I would get a big check from all of these cities that the show.
But that's maybe, sorry for interrupting you, that's easy to follow because there's always a new deal on a new market. What happens if in the main market, the show succeeds beyond expectations? Do musicians get paid for that?
Well, what I'm trying to answer is the question I think you're asking, which is the streaming model, which is where we are now. So we talked about the old model, which is the syndication. What happened when we started going into negotiations with Netflix and their people is that they are a black box. They didn't want to share how many subscribers they had because we were trying to find how to quantify how much money they're getting, because if you're in Netflix, they got a zillion shows in there. So how do you know what show is a hit? Well, they will tell you, oh, this one had the most views. This is the #1 show in Israel right now. Okay, well, how many views is that? And they used to not tell you. They used to hold that data as private data for themselves.
Not just for unions, but also
everybody,
for the public. Nowadays, they have to open. They hide the subscriber numbers from the capital markets, but they do show what you're saying about success. Right,
and it changes depending, you know, on the company. But with Netflix, the unions were able to get them to provide data in a way that is what they call, like, it would be under an NDA, in the sense that they could show their books.
Non-disclosure agreement.
They would show their books, but they wouldn't necessarily make it a public thing. Meaning, like, you're not going to know, but the union knows. So then the union knows, okay, this is how much you owe the performers. So now, yes, to answer your question, the performers are getting paid. The actors are in a better position than the musicians. The musicians, we are not seeing the kind of revenue we need to see from Netflix for our music and TV shows. Where we're making money is when they hire me to write for the TV show. So if I'm on Stranger Things and they say, okay, we want you to do season 9, they're going to pay me $10,000 per episode.
But that's just up front.
That's only up front. And then they'll say, if it's Netflix, this is $10,000 up front, we want a buyout. Meaning we don't want to talk to you again. Here's the money, go away, don't call us again. That happens. Or you can negotiate, okay, we will pay you $5,000 up front, but then we will pay you the royalties based on how much money we make when we put the show in the airplane program or the, you know, the, I don't know, people, you know, wherever they license it again. You know, if they license it to Fubu, I don't know, some other streaming channel in another country, the revenues Netflix gets, then they have to give you a percentage. So the deals look a little different, but I think the musicians still stand to gain and should gain more.
Yeah, okay. My last question about rights would be about something a bit ironic happening nowadays in the US, that of all people, lawmakers are taking part in some kind of an infringement of intellectual property when they use songs in political campaigns without musicians' consent. For example, Foo Fighters' song, Beyonce and Olivia Rodriguez's song. What do you think of that?
Well, sometimes I think it's funny as hell when you see, like, Trump dancing to, like, Village People. I just think it's funny. What song? I think he was singing a Village People song, right?
Yeah, the YMCA group.
YMCA, yeah, those guys. I think it's funny for him to be dancing to a gay song, a gay anthem. I think it's hilarious. I think people need to, too many people are too uptight about things. You got to find more humor in life. I understand some artists are really passionate, but in some cases, we have like freedom of speech in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
And so I think if I'm Trump and I want to use some Beyonce song, but Beyonce hates me, if I'm paying however much Beyonce charges, then it's not her problem anymore. And so I paid you the money, just go away. And probably a lot of artists would disagree with me. It's like, no, I don't want my song. I mean, I'm not necessarily a Trump supporter. I think he's made some good moves, and I think he's made some bad moves. Like anybody, even me, I screw up at least once a day. I think we all do. But you offend somebody. Oh, I didn't mean to offend you. I was trying to be funny. But I think if the song is in public domain, and there's a process to legally use the song, then they should legally pay and use the song. And whether they like the person that used it or not, then if I have the Church of Satan and I want to play, I don't know, Madonna's Like a Prayer in the thing, and she's I don't want.
Not a good idea.
I don't know, but maybe I'd say, hey, I paid you your money, just shut up already. Just pay however much they need. In terms of banning the song and say, you cannot play the song.
No matter how much money you give me, you say that.
Yeah, that's kind of no. It seems crazy that people can ban people. It's like we need more openness, not more closeness. Even if we disagree with each other. Obviously, if it's something illegal, like if they're doing, pedophilia with some music of mine, I mean, that would be horrible.
Yeah.
Something that's illegal, if you're breaking the law, no, don't do that. So I don't know. Does that sound weird?
No, that makes total sense. Okay, I wanted to touch with you to conclude this interview about AI music. I'm curious about your opinion. Virtual AI singers such as Breaking Rust, Xenia Monet, Tata. Behind them, there are real people.
Right.
Sometimes they just write AI prompts in 2 seconds. Other times they do write lyrics, melodies, arrangements, and they just use AI as performers. Should radio play or Billboard treat them equally as any other musician?
This whole hysteria around AI is like people running around with their hair on fire. It's just, they need to get over it. Like, the shit is coming. It's going to happen. It's already happening. So how do we work with it, right? And in terms of the radio, if the radio likes the fucking song, let them play the song. Who gives a shit? I think there needs to just be balance. Like, we want live artists. I don't think an AI is going to replace this amazing live experience you get, like what we saw here, what you see around the world. People crave being in a room with other people, believe it or not, listening to music together and having an experience is a shared experience. You're not going to get that with AI.
But there are musicians that it's important for them, their position in some random Spotify playlist, and they know that if of 40 tracks, some AI musician took their track, like their spot, it's devastating for them.
Yeah, that breaks their heart and everything. I don't know, wear your big boy pants and, I don't know, go take a shower. I don't know. People take life, the thing is, we're all going to die. So if you're over here fighting about all this shit, at some point you're going to be a little dust in the wind, So enjoy life. And the AI thing is a pain in the ass. Let's figure out how to work with it. And hopefully it doesn't get too smart, and then we're just going to be like brains in a jar, like in Futurama, or you ever see with like the brain in the jar. Hopefully we're not going to end up like that, but maybe that's going to be cool. I don't know. Who knows?
Me neither.
So I think we just need to enjoy life and chill the fuck out and just, not run around with your hair on fire.
So you also don't think that Timbaland, when he is collaborating with Sony Music and making himself the face of that AI music generating company, you don't think he's cutting the branch that he and fellow musicians sit on?
I can see people who feel that way. I think every man and woman to themselves. I grew up in the Bronx where you had to survive, right? So if that's going to help him survive and put food on his table, more power to him. There's still going to be people who want to be in a room with an artist and hear them live. Some of these AI things, I think it's amazing, and maybe it's going to get to the point where it's going to be like, wow, this is better than human. But I don't know, still, they're not going to have a flesh person in a room that's an AI singing to an audience, and I think audiences crave that. I think that we're always going to need that. You look at opera music; it's been around since 500 years. Well, there's some operas that are maybe 300 or 400 years old. Let's say, still the same art form. And they're still playing the same Verdi shit the same way, the same. And I say shit, but it's good shit. It's a good shit. And you still have like Puccini, and you have all these amazing operas, and they're still doing it. They have different costumes, different sets, and everything, but it's still the same music. And I think, 300-400 years from now, they're gonna still probably listen to Taylor Swift or the Beatles, and they will still get their money, and so it's all good. I don't think people need to panic so much. We were panicked when the synthesizer was invented. All the keyboard players,
really?
When the synthesizer was created, people were mad at him. Oh, you're using that shit. Well, he's playing piano now. He's not using the synth. But, I think we need to leave openness for creative use of these technologies. Obviously, where we see danger, real danger, we need to find balance and use the governments to help us, because the government has a responsibility to protect its people, and artists are, part of the population. So we find balance. I'm joking in a way, but in a way I'm serious. Like, we do need to keep an eye on this technology so it's not infringing all of these artists without compensating them. If you want to sound like Timbaland or whoever, just make sure he's compensated for the use of that somehow. What does that look like? I don't know what it looks like.
And we're seeing a few of those deals recently with the 3 major labels.
Exactly, we're seeing that. And the thing is to keep an eye on the labels, because they're the greediest ones. So whatever deals they're doing, make sure there's no back end deal that's happening, behind the scenes deal.
John Akosta, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you have a nice day.
Cool. I love your jacket too. I used to have one like that back in the day. Is that
that's
real?
Not real
leather?
For the product, that's not real leather.
It looks real though. But good, the vegetarians would be happy.
Yeah. But my first concern is the money. Although also for the moral facts, I'm not sure.
It looks good. They're not too expensive though. The real leather one.
It depends on your paycheck. Well, John Acosta, thank
nice
you very much.